Welcome back to America's Biggest Crimes, where we dive deep into the stories that shock, sadden, and spark conversation across the nation. And today, we're covering a heartbreaking case that unfolded just days ago in the quiet town of West Melbourne, Florida. A 22-year-old man, Jeremyah Campbell, stands accused of a crime so unthinkable, it's left an entire community reeling. The murder of his own grandparents, George and Mary White, and the attempted murder of a neighbor who tried to help. This is a story of family, betrayal, and a senseless act of violence that claimed 2 lives and shattered a peaceful neighborhood. Over the next few minutes, we'll walk you through the chilling details of that fateful night, the investigation that followed, and the questions that still haunt those left behind. Why did this happen? What drove a young man to turn on the very people who loved him? Stick with us as we uncover the truth behind this tragedy. Before we begin, a quick reminder. Please hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss an episode. And a warning, this case involves graphic details of violence, so viewer discretion is advised. Let's get started. On the evening of July 23, 2025, the small town of West Melbourne, Florida, was just another quiet slice of suburban America. Located on Florida's Space Coast, this close-knit community of about 25,000 people is known for its peaceful streets and family-friendly vibe. But around 8:45 p.m., that peace was shattered by a 911 call that would change everything. At a home on the corner of Washington Street and Milwaukee Avenue, 83-year-old George White and his 81-year-old wife, Mary White, were living what should have been a serene chapter of their lives. The couple had been married for decades, well loved by neighbors who described them as kind and generous. One neighbor, Terry French, who had known the Whites for nearly 40 years, called George one of the best neighbors I ever had. He said George would do anything for anyone, a sentiment echoed by others in the community. But that night, inside their home, something went horribly wrong. According to the Brevard County Sheriff's Office, 22-year-old Jeremyah Campbell, the Whites' grandson from Texas, was staying at their residence. He had arrived just a few days earlier, though the reason for his visit remains unclear. What we do know is that around 8 p.m., Campbell allegedly picked up a 9mm pistol and shot his grandmother, Mary White, multiple times inside the home. She was pronounced dead at the scene, her life taken in a sudden, brutal act. George White, witnessing the unimaginable, fled across the street to the home of his longtime neighbor, Terry French. Desperate and frantic, George banged on the door, shouting that his wife had been shot and pleading for help. Terry let George inside, locking the door behind him for safety. But Campbell wasn't done. He followed his grandfather, firing through Terry's front door. Bullets tore through the wood, striking George White and Terry's 25-year-old granddaughter, who was also in the home, attempting to call 911. George succumbed to his injuries at a nearby hospital, joining his wife as the second victim of this horrific domestic incident. The neighbor's granddaughter, thankfully, survived with non-life-threatening injuries and is expected to recover. But the trauma of that night will linger for years to come. As police sirens pierced the night, deputies from the Brevard County Sheriff's Office and officers from the West Melbourne Police Department descended on the scene. Neighbors reported hearing multiple gunshots. Some described a volley of 5 shots, a pause, then a final shot, followed by a woman's scream. The quiet neighborhood was now a crime scene, and the hunt for the suspect was on. The suspect, Jeremyah Campbell, was no stranger to the victims. At 22 years old, he was their grandson, a young man from Texas who had come to stay with his grandparents for reasons that investigators are still piecing together. Sheriff Wayne Ivey, in a press conference the following day, called the incident an isolated domestic incident, emphasizing that there was no ongoing threat to the community. But for those who knew the Whites, the question wasn't about public safety. It was about motive. Why would a grandson turn on his own family? After the shooting, Campbell fled the scene, prompting an extensive search through the wooded areas near the Whites' home. Sheriff's deputies, along with West Melbourne police, worked tirelessly through the night. Hours later, Campbell was located and taken into custody without further incident. He was booked into the Brevard County Jail, where he remains on no bond status. A warrant signed by Judge Kim Musselman charged Campbell with 2 counts of second-degree murder for the deaths of George and Mary White, 1 count of attempted second-degree murder for the shooting of the neighbor's granddaughter, and 1 count of shooting into an occupied residence. These charges carry the possibility of life in prison, a weighty consequence for a young man who, just days earlier, was a guest in his grandparents' home. Investigators quickly began combing through the crime scene. Inside the Whites' residence, they found Mary White's body, riddled with gunshot wounds. At Terry French's home, bullet holes in the front door told a chilling story of Campbell's determination to pursue his grandfather. Terry later told reporters, "I have never, ever heard a gunshot out here in all them years. And now I got 6 of them. For through my door." The 9mm pistol believed to have been used in the attack was recovered, though details about its origin or ownership have not been publicly disclosed. On July 24, 2025, Campbell made his initial court appearance before County Judge Michelle Baker. The courtroom was heavy with emotion as the charges were read. Posts on X captured the public's shock, with some users noting Campbell appeared to cry during the hearing, though his demeanor did little to quell the outrage over the crime. Judge Baker denied bond, ensuring Campbell would remain behind bars as the case moves forward. The investigation, led by the Brevard County Sheriff's Office, is ongoing, but one thing remains elusive: a motive. Neighbor Terry French, whose granddaughter was injured, told reporters, "I have no clue of why or what reason that young fella had." Sheriff's Office Public Information Officer Todd Goodyear echoed this sentiment, stating, "We do not know exactly why that occurred and what led up to it. Was it a personal dispute, a mental health crisis, or something else entirely?" As of now, authorities have released no information about what drove Campbell to commit such a heinous act. George and Mary White were more than just victims. They were the heart of their community. George, 83, and Mary, 81, had lived in West Melbourne for decades, building a life filled with love and connection. Neighbors described them as the kind of people who would drop everything to help. Terry French, who had known them for nearly 40 years, said, "George was probably one of the best neighbors I ever had. He'd do anything for you." Their deaths have left a void in West Melbourne. The neighborhood, described as quiet and safe, is struggling to make sense of the violence. Resident Shay Stewart told Wesh, "5 gunshots, a pause, then the last one. Then, I heard the scream of a woman." The sound of those shots and that scream have become a haunting memory for a community unaccustomed to such tragedy. The surviving victim, the 25-year-old granddaughter of Terry French, is recovering from her injuries. Terry described her as tough, but the emotional scars of witnessing George White's death in her home will likely take far longer to heal. The community has rallied around the Whites' family and friends, with Sheriff Wayne Ivey asking the public to keep them in their thoughts and prayers. This case has also sparked broader conversations about domestic violence and gun accessibility. Posts on X, like one from a domestic gun, highlighted the tragedy as a reminder that guns don't make us safer, pointing to the devastating consequences of firearms in domestic disputes. While the debate over gun laws is complex, there's no denying the pain this incident has caused. As we dig deeper into this case, the biggest question remains: why? Jeremyah Campbell had been staying with his grandparents for just 5 days before the shooting. Was there a hidden conflict brewing? Did Campbell have a history of mental health issues or prior run-ins with the law? So far, authorities haven't released details about Campbell's background, but these are the questions investigators are likely exploring. Domestic violence cases involving family members are tragically common, but the targeting of elderly grandparents by a young relative is particularly shocking. According to the FBI's 2023 crime statistics, about 13% of homicides in the US involve family members, with domestic disputes often escalating to deadly outcomes. Could this have been a preventable tragedy? Were there warning signs that went unnoticed? Another angle to consider is Campbell's life in Texas. Why did he travel to Florida? Was he struggling with personal issues that his grandparents were trying to help him navigate? Without a clear motive, speculation runs rampant, but we must be cautious not to jump to conclusions. The truth may lie in the details that emerge as the case progresses through the courts. The West Melbourne tragedy is a stark reminder of how quickly lives can be torn apart by violence. George and Mary White deserved to live out their golden years in peace, surrounded by the love of their family and neighbors. Instead, their lives were cut short in an act of unimaginable cruelty. As we await further developments in Jeremiah Campbell's case, we're left with more questions than answers. But one thing is certain: the pain of this loss will linger in West Melbourne for years to come. Thank you for joining us on America's Biggest Crimes as we honor the memory of George and Mary White and seek to understand the events that led to this heartbreaking incident. If you found this episode compelling, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth coverage of America's most gripping cases. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. Do you think we'll ever know the full story behind Campbell's actions?